Episode 4 begins immediately after Tiju's car crashes while fleeing from the police. When officers surround the vehicle, they discover that Tiju has already escaped. He slipped out before they reach the car and is now making his way through the nearby streets on foot. Before long, more officers spot him and another chase begins. One of the officers eventually catches up to Tiju, and the two struggle. During the confrontation, the officer is seriously injured. Although Tiju desperately needs to continue searching for Si-yeon, he refuses to abandon the wounded policeman. Using his medical knowledge, he performs first aid to stabilize the officer before calling the hospital to send an ambulance. Only after making sure help is on the way does he continue running. Meanwhile, Si-yeon continues trying to escape from the room where she is being held. Having already freed her foot from the ankle shackle, she uses the heavy iron weight that had been chained to her leg. She ties an electrical cable around it and repeatedly swings the weight into the locked door until it finally breaks open. Si-yeon quietly steps into the hallway. Although she finally has a chance to escape, she refuses to leave without helping the woman imprisoned next door. She rushes to Sun-ya's cell and begins searching through a large collection of keys hanging nearby. Sun-ya begs Si-yeon to stop wasting time and save herself instead, believing she has no chance of surviving. Si-yeon ignores her and desperately tests one key after another. Just as she finally unlocks the cell door, Man-hee returns to the hideout. He catches Si-yeon before she can free Sun-ya and drags her back into captivity, ending her escape attempt. Elsewhere, Tiju finally reaches the address that Soo-young secretly gave him before he escaped police custody. Expecting to find Si-yeon, he instead arrives at Soo-young's home. Furious, Tiju immediately points his gun at Soo-young and demands to know where his wife is. He accuses Soo-young of working together with the kidnapper after noticing photographs of Si-yeon, himself, and another missing woman inside the house. Soo-young explains that the other woman in the photographs was his own wife. He reveals that 6 years earlier, she was kidnapped by the exact same man. At the time, Soo-young was a detective. While working at the police station, he received a phone call. Instead of hearing his wife's voice, he heard the kidnapper. The kidnapper sent him photographs, proving that his wife was alive, before demanding a ransom. Soo-young immediately paid the money. However, the kidnapper later demanded even more money, increasing the total ransom to 100 million won. Desperate to save his wife, Soo-young followed every instruction and delivered the additional money to the agreed location. Even after receiving the full ransom, the kidnapper never returned his wife. Instead, he later contacted Soo-young again and cruelly claimed that everything happened because of a mistake Soo-young had made, although he refused to explain what that mistake was. Since then, Soo-young has spent 6 years secretly investigating similar disappearances and collecting evidence, convinced that the same serial kidnapper is responsible. He recognized the kidnapper's voice during Tiju's phone conversation and immediately realized the same man had returned. Soo-young admits that he approached Tiju because he intended to use him as bait to finally lure the killer into the open. Still unwilling to trust him, Tiju injects Soo-young with an anesthetic and demands to know where Si-yeon is. Soo-young insists he is telling the truth and shows Tiju years' worth of investigation files documenting numerous victims connected to the same criminal. He tells Tiju that the only realistic way to rescue Si-yeon is to prepare the ransom money, follow the kidnapper's demands, and force him to reveal himself. Back at the hideout, Si-yeon regains consciousness. This time, her hands have been restrained while the ankle shackle has been removed. That evening, Man-hee walks through the corridor carrying a large hammer. Believing she is about to die, Si-yeon desperately begs him to spare Sun-ya instead. Ignoring her cries, Man-hee walks into Sun-ya's room. From her own cell, Si-yeon hears Sun-ya quietly praying as she prepares herself for death. Although the attack itself is not shown, it is heavily implied that Man-hee kills her. Following Soo-young's instructions, Tiju goes directly to his in-laws' home and demands 3 billion won in cash. His in-laws immediately assume he kidnapped Si-yeon for money and refuse to believe he is trying to save her. Tiju refuses to explain his plan. Instead, he fires his gun into the walls of the house to convince them he is serious. Terrified, they hand over the money. Tae-ju immediately leaves with the ransom. The following morning, Si-yeon's parents report everything to the police. They angrily criticize the investigation, insisting the police should have captured Tae-ju long ago instead of allowing him to threaten them inside their own home. News reports quickly spread the story across television. Hospital staff, including Tae-ju's colleagues, are shocked to see reports claiming he robbed his own in-laws at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Man-hee watches the same news report. Exactly as Soo-young predicted, the report catches the kidnapper's attention and unsettles him, making him realize Tae-ju's behavior is becoming increasingly unpredictable. The next stage of Soo-young's plan begins. Using official police documents provided through one of his trusted contacts, he arranges for Tae-ju to collect investigation files connected to previous kidnappings. Tae-ju successfully retrieves the files from the police records office and begins studying years of evidence gathered from similar cases. Back at the hideout, Man-hee visits Si-yeon again. He brings her food and calmly tells her to eat because she will need her strength. He then tells her to think carefully about what her husband has done that caused her to end up in this situation, once again suggesting that every victim is somehow being punished for another person's wrongdoing. Although frightened, Si-yeon refuses to give up. She continues carefully examining every corner of her room, looking underneath the door and searching for anything that might help her escape. Meanwhile, Tae-ju studies the investigation files and follows the information gathered by Soo-young over the past 6 years. His search eventually leads him to one of the surveillance cameras secretly installed by Man-hee. At the same time, Man-hee is monitoring his CCTV system. Suddenly, one of the camera feeds activates. To his surprise, he realizes someone has located part of his surveillance network. That person is Tae-ju. For the first time since Si-yeon's kidnapping, Tae-ju is getting dangerously close to discovering the kidnapper's hideout, while Man-hee realizes his carefully hidden operation may finally have been exposed. Episode 4 ends with both men unknowingly closing in on one another, setting up the confrontation to come in the next episode.